I'm starting to think there might be something going on between my wife and a coworker of mine, and honestly, it's beginning to seem like it could be true. I'm a 36-year-old guy, and back in 2014, I had a serendipitous encounter with my wife, Natalie, who was 32 at the time. I first spotted Natalie at a local mall food court. I had originally planned to eat at a different place, but the line there was ridiculously long, so I ended up in the queue at the restaurant where Natalie was waiting. When our eyes met, I was immediately struck by how beautiful she was. Natalie, seeing my reaction, laughed and explained that she wasn't actually waiting in line for food. She told me her cousin worked there, and she was just killing time until her cousin's shift ended. I was relieved she started the conversation, because I was at a loss for words. Her friendly demeanor helped me break the ice with a bit of humor, and we started chatting while she waited. I could tell I was making a good impression on her. As she waited, I offered to buy her something to eat, but Natalie preferred a strawberry lemonade. I got it for her, and we kept talking, with me staying lighthearted and amusing. When her cousin finally showed up, I seized the chance to ask for Natalie's phone number, which she happily gave me before they left. From that moment on, I put in every effort to win her over. After several dates, social outings with friends, and a lot of time spent together, we officially became a couple. We married in 2017, and over time, we welcomed 3 amazing kids into our lives, 2 daughters and a son in between. We've grown into dedicated parents, making sacrifices like cutting back on our nightlife to focus on our family. I've always felt lucky to have Natalie. Not only does she have a fantastic personality, but her stunning looks also brought me compliments from friends. Natalie, of Cuban heritage, has a striking appearance that blends traits of Wonder Woman and Salma Hayek. She's curvaceous, sports arm tattoos, and is known for her signature ponytail, especially in her selfies. Financially, we're doing well. I work as a maintenance man, and Natalie, who joined her sister in the interior decorating business, contributes to our comfortable lifestyle. I've been committed to my job for 7 years, never expecting that a colleague would stir trouble in my marriage. The trouble began last Wednesday. There's a guy in the shipping department, let's call him Marcus. We're not close, but we chat occasionally during lunch breaks. The most time we've spent together was probably playing dice in the parking lot at work. We mostly talk basketball during our lunch breaks. One weekend, my car had brake issues, so Natalie kindly offered to drive me to work and pick me up afterward. The first time she came early and had to wait about 30 minutes for me. During that time, she struck up a conversation with Marcus and another coworker, Jasmine. After introducing Natalie as my wife, we had some casual chit-chat before heading home. Looking back, that might have been when things started to shift. I suspect Marcus began getting close to Natalie during that week when she was picking me up from work. Whenever my shift ended, I'd often find Natalie hanging out with Marcus and Jasmine in the office, listening to rap music through Marcus's Beats by Dre headphones. Natalie mentioned enjoying Jasmine's company and spending time in the office with her and Marcus. Since Jasmine and Marcus lived nearby and were friends, I didn't initially think much of it. After that week, Natalie began visiting my workplace more often to socialize with Marcus and Jasmine. Given that Jasmine was supposed to be my friend too, I didn't mind her visiting or chatting on the phone. However, I started to notice Marcus's frequent presence and his ongoing conversations with Natalie. Natalie's Instagram presence often drew a lot of attention, so I tried to keep my concerns in check, even when I saw her talking to Marcus without Jasmine around. I didn't want to jump to conclusions and risk causing arguments with Natalie. It was last Wednesday when my suspicions about Natalie's possible infidelity started to surface. As I was leaving work that day, I said goodbye to a colleague who was on the phone. What caught my attention was how the person on the other end seemed to know my name. Curious, I asked who he was talking to, and he replied with a smile that it was an old coworker of ours. He then asked me to hold on for a moment, saying that the person on the other end wanted to have a quick chat with me. I was actually happy to reconnect with this guy, so when he handed me the phone, I was ready for the conversation. The person on the line was an old coworker, whom I'll call Andre. We spent some time reminiscing about our past jobs and discussing why he had left. Andre explained that he had moved to Atlanta to work in a warehouse with his brother, who promised him a job. He joked about how he was now making more money than us. After catching up, Andre said he had something important to talk about and asked for my phone number. I agreed, and he told me to send him my number via a Facebook direct message. I did as instructed and handed the phone back. Just as I was heading to my car, Andre called me back. I picked up and asked him what was going on. He asked if I was in my car, and when I confirmed, he told me to stay put because he had something crucial to tell me. This piqued my curiosity, so I pressed him for details. Andre stressed that what he was about to share needed to remain confidential, and I assured him I'd keep it a secret. He then asked if Natalie was still visiting my workplace, which took me by surprise. I said yes, and he followed up by asking if Marcus was still talking to Natalie. Again, I confirmed, and his persistent questioning began to make me uneasy. He insisted he didn't want to stir up trouble, but felt it was important for me to know that Marcus seemed to have an interest in my wife. Hearing this sent a shiver down my spine. I asked how he knew this, and Andre revealed that he had observed their interactions. Andre used to be in a leadership position and moved around different departments, so he had a good view of things. He mentioned seeing Natalie and Marcus chatting frequently, and that Andre had even made comments about Natalie's appearance to our co-workers. When I asked him about the timing of their interactions, he said it usually happened about an hour before lunch. He had seen Natalie talking to Jasmine occasionally, but she was often with Marcus. Andre mentioned that it was when Natalie started visiting on Saturdays, particularly when Marcus's department had to work overtime, that he started to suspect something. This surprised me because I rarely worked overtime, so it was unclear why she would be there. I asked Andre if he was sure about Natalie's Saturday visits, and he confirmed he was certain. He believed that Marcus might have been getting closer to her during one of these visits. Andre said that with the lack of other activities on Saturdays, they had plenty of free time, and Marcus would play his beats by Dre speaker. Andre noticed that Natalie's presence there seemed normal at first, but then he overheard loud Spanish music and saw things take an intimate turn. Andre described how Natalie and the guys were getting close. He told me that Marcus had his hands on Natalie's neck while she was twerking for him. Although Natalie wasn't extremely curvaceous, she could still twerk if she wanted to. Hearing this left me stunned. I asked Andre if he was absolutely sure, and he reassured me he was not mistaken. He described how everyone watched as Natalie danced provocatively, even mentioning that Marcus had lifted her shirt to reveal her backside through her leggings. I asked if she tried to stop Marcus's advances, but Andre said no. She just laughed and kept dancing, almost like she was putting on a show. I struggled to believe what Andre was telling me. He expressed his regrets and advised me to keep Natalie away from Marcus and Jasmine. I thanked him for the information, and we wrapped up our conversation. I was left feeling deeply embarrassed and humiliated. As I drove home, my mind raced with troubling thoughts. What troubled me even more was that this incident with Natalie and Marcus had supposedly happened about 7 or 8 months ago. Who knows what might have happened since then? They could have met up at his place and done more than just dance. I realized I needed to confront Natalie and see if she would come clean. When I got home, I found Natalie on the phone with her mom. After some light conversation, I asked if she had seen Jasmine that day. She said she had. Then I asked if she had seen Marcus, and she said no. I expressed my surprise, noting that they seemed inseparable, like the Three Musketeers. Natalie claimed that Marcus wasn't around much, but I knew this was a blatant lie. Following this exchange, she walked past me into the kitchen, probably to text her friends. I was stunned by her blatant dishonesty about her relationship with Marcus. Even I had seen how often he was around her, and it hurt deeply to see the truth becoming increasingly clear. As I watched her prepare dinner for our kids, I was overwhelmed with a mix of anger and tearful sadness. At this point, I desperately needed solid evidence that something was actually going on. However, getting that proof would be tricky, especially since it involved people I worked with. I couldn't afford to risk my job, and Andre's account of the twerking incident wouldn't be enough to justify a divorce. They could easily deny it ever happened. Natalie might argue that she was just delivering lunch to Marcus, and the elderly security guard would likely back up her story. I had to assume the worst, that Natalie had cheated on me and had secretly met up with Marcus 8 months ago. With so much time having passed, I couldn't imagine what might have happened since then. I needed to figure out how to get solid evidence for a potential divorce, while also protecting my job and preparing for any backlash from her family. I'll provide an update if I manage to come up with a plan. Update: the situation keeps getting worse, and I'm seeing more troubling signs. it's looking increasingly likely that my coworker may have had an affair with my wife. To give some background, Natalie, who I'll refer to as my wife, had to pick me up from work because my car needed brake repairs. While she was waiting for me, she struck up a friendship with Jasmine from the front office and Marcus from the shipping department. I often saw them chatting and listening to rap music when I left the floor. Over time, Natalie became quite close with them and even visited my workplace on her days off to join them for lunch. A few weeks ago, I got a disturbing call from an old coworker, Andre. He told me that Marcus might have made advances toward Natalie. Andre said he had seen them having private, flirtatious conversations, usually about an hour before Marcus's lunch break. What troubled me even more was that Andre had witnessed Natalie visiting Marcus during overtime on Saturdays. Initially, Andre was hesitant to share details, but one Saturday, he saw something that pushed him to tell me. Andre described entering the shipping dock and hearing Spanish music. When he looked inside, he saw Natalie dancing and twerking for Marcus. What began as playful behavior had escalated into something more sensual and aggressive. He detailed how Marcus had his hands on Natalie's neck and lifted her shirt to expose her backside. Although their initial interactions seemed playful, it became clear that things had taken a more serious turn, especially given the way they exchanged glances. My first instinct was to make excuses for Natalie, questioning whether it was really her. Andre assured me he was certain, describing Natalie's Cuban descent, her arm tattoos, and her signature ponytail. After witnessing this, Andre decided to leave and head home. I struggled to process the shocking information he had shared. The fact that Natalie had been twerking for Marcus was distressing enough, but the knowledge that this happened around 8 or 9 months ago made it even worse. I couldn't help but wonder what her relationship with Marcus might be like now. While I appreciated Andre's honesty, it felt like the information came too late. I wished he had spoken up sooner, but his reluctance to expose Marcus had likely allowed things between Marcus and Natalie to progress. When I returned home, I confronted Natalie about her friendship with Marcus. She claimed they occasionally spoke, but he wasn't around much, and she mostly talked to Jasmine. I recognized this as another fabrication, having witnessed their interactions myself. Andre's revelations had helped me see through her deception, making it clear that she was using her friendship with Jasmine as a cover for spending time with Marcus. Following my conversation with Andre and Natalie's lies about Marcus, I started discreetly investigating around the house. Unfortunately, I couldn't access her iPhone due to her secure passcode, and she seemed constantly engaged in conversations with her mom and sister. I took to eavesdropping on Natalie's late-night conversations to gather more information. I noticed she often slipped out to the back porch to chat, which gave me the chance to listen in from a distance. Though I couldn't hear her conversation partner, certain phrases stood out to me. "Stop," "You're crazy," and mentions of fun at a specific local club. Once I heard her say, "She can't go over there," which made me suspect she was referring to Marcus's place. Without the full conversation, I couldn't be certain, but it was troubling. When Natalie came back inside, I questioned her about the call. She claimed it was either her sister Jasmine or someone else, but her giggles and the way she tried to hide her phone made me question her honesty. It was clear that I had been oblivious to the signs until Andre's revelation. After that call, I started noticing red flags. Natalie now clung to her phone, avoided me, and always seemed busy. When I suggested intimacy, she laughed it off and said it wasn't appropriate with the kids around. When I pressed her, she dismissed me as unreasonable and said she wasn't in the mood. Her behavior, both before and after Andre's call, made me question her faithfulness and wonder why I ever thought this was normal. Last Saturday, I inadvertently spoiled her plans to meet Marcus, which seemed to infuriate her. After work, Natalie called me while I was driving home and mentioned her plans to go out, instructing me to cook for the kids. I immediately suspected she was heading to see Marcus, so I lied and said I had errands to run. Natalie said she was already getting ready to leave and asked her sister to watch the kids, which I knew wasn't possible. Despite her attempts to guilt me into making her stay, I insisted that I had the right to run errands and might be out late. Natalie's whatever and abrupt hang-up only fueled my suspicion. Later that night, Natalie's attitude was off. When I tried to talk, she exploded, blaming me for ruining her evening. I told her I didn't care and that my errands were more important than her plans. Natalie argued that I had never complained about her being out late before, but I countered that I had always been with her, making her argument invalid. After my shower, I saw her on the porch, talking on her phone with a look of irritation. I was almost certain she was discussing me. Things got worse a couple of days ago. That night after work, Natalie prepared dinner and came into the bedroom where I was browsing for new Jordans on my phone. She informed me that dinner was ready. When I joined her, she was dressed up, ready to go out. I asked where she was going, and she said she was heading out with some friends, leaving me in charge of the kids. When I asked who her friends were, she just said, "Her friends," which only made me more frustrated. I expressed my concern about her leaving, and Natalie accused me of trying to control her. With an attitude, she walked out the door. I was upset because it was clear she was still upset about missing her time with Marcus, and she had been visibly down about it ever since. Natalie didn't return until around 2:30 a.m. I sent her texts all night, but she only replied, "Please stop texting me," which only made me more frustrated. When she finally came home, I was playing our son's PlayStation. As soon as I saw her, we began arguing. I questioned her late return, and she said she had been with friends, which I refused to accept. Natalie claimed I had never complained about her coming home late before, but I argued that I had always been with her, making her claim irrelevant. She cursed at me and accused me of trying to control her, but I firmly disagreed. When our son came out to see what was happening, Natalie said she wouldn't argue anymore and stormed into the bedroom. Our son asked if he could play the game, and I let him, but only for a short while before he needed to sleep. After he started playing, I wanted to continue the argument with Natalie. I wasn't going to let her make me think I was a controlling husband when she was the one who had come home so late. I usually tried to stay calm, but my suspicions were overwhelming. Coming home at 2 a.m. was disrespectful, especially given her behavior earlier. After our argument, we went to the bedroom to continue discussing her late return. Just as I was about to speak, I was stunned into silence. Natalie was in the middle of undressing. It seemed like Natalie was wearing nothing but a black string for underwear. I guess she thought I'd still be occupied with our son, because she looked genuinely surprised when I walked in. Standing there in just a flimsy piece of string, she appeared almost embarrassed. When she briefly glanced at me, I could tell from her look that any questions I asked would probably lead to an argument. She quickly grabbed her pajamas off the bed and retreated to the bathroom to change. I was in disbelief over what I had just seen, and honestly, I was left completely stunned. Deciding to sleep on the couch seemed like the best option after witnessing that. My mind was struggling to process the shock. I had never seen Natalie in such revealing underwear before. It was like she was wearing a barely there black string. Sure, Natalie had some provocative lingerie tucked away, but it had been a while since she'd worn anything like that. While she used to flaunt skimpy swimwear on Instagram during vacations, this was more akin to something you'd find on a site like WorldStar. At this point, I couldn't shake the feeling that Natalie was hiding something and acting very suspiciously. After reading some advice online, I decided to record her secretly to catch her in the act. I ordered a voice-activated recorder and planned to place it in her car. A friend agreed to let me use his address for the delivery without any questions. Once it arrives, I'll pick it up to avoid any awkward questions from Natalie about the package. I'm determined to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it takes. Andre's insights have made me more confident that my suspicions are valid. I'll try to keep updating you as long as I can stay level-headed and keep up appearances. Update. I want to thank everyone who's been supporting me through this tough time with Natalie. Your help in uncovering the truth about her potential infidelity has been crucial. The conversations we've had have given me both strength and guidance. I genuinely appreciate all the support. The advice I've received has been mixed, though. Some suggest using concrete evidence against her, while others think I should confront the issues directly. I was trying to decide the best approach when Natalie made a move that forced me to act. Yes, she broke her vows. During our vacations, she'd wear revealing swimwear, but it was usually for Instagram posts. This black string underwear she was wearing wasn't something you wear casually. It's meant to be shown off. Seeing that left me in shock, and I walked out of the room without getting into an argument. Thanks to Andre, everything feels like it's falling apart, and the signs are glaringly clear. Before Andre's input, I'd always tried not to be the jealous type. Natalie is undeniably attractive and gets compliments all the time. She enjoys sharing photos on Instagram and gets a lot of attention there. Many comments on her photos are inappropriate, and even older ones still get likes. It's tough for someone with jealousy issues to be with a wife who has thousands of followers on social media. I was aware of this and tried to be understanding, but this situation is different. I may have been too passive because we're married, and I felt something needed to change. That's why I decided to gather evidence. I bought a voice-activated recorder and planned to use it to get proof. If it turned out to be true, I was ready to seek a divorce. With the VAR device ready, I decided to ride with Natalie to the supermarket, hoping to smooth things over. I thought if we could resolve any issues, she might stop seeing Marcus. I told Natalie it was fine for her to go out with friends, but as a parent, she still had responsibilities at home. She countered by asserting her independence and accused me of being controlling. She insisted on her right to enjoy time with her friends without being tied down to the house or work. I mentioned that while I understood her need for fun, her spontaneity was becoming excessive. She wasn't forthcoming about her plans, which concerned me. Natalie acknowledged my concerns and promised to be more considerate of me and our family. After that conversation, she seemed more considerate, and I felt we could discuss our relationship more deeply. However, that changed when Marcus called a couple of days later. I wasn't sure how to handle it at first, but Natalie's actions pushed me to take a step today. Earlier this week, Natalie mentioned that our kids wanted to watch a Pixar movie with their older cousins this Saturday. She said she would take them so they could all watch it together, which sounded like a good plan to me, as it meant quality time with the kids. A few hours later, I received a call from my nephew. He asked if he could come over after the movie to play a video game he heard we had. I told him if Natalie was planning to bring him back after the movie, it would be fine for him to come over. He seemed excited and said he would check with Natalie when she picked them up. His comment left me puzzled. I was under the impression that Natalie was supposed to watch the movie with the kids, but my nephew informed me that Natalie had only planned to drop them off. I had slept in that morning, so I wondered if I had misunderstood. However, I clearly remembered Natalie saying she would watch the movie with them, and now it was apparent she had lied. Then I remembered it was Saturday, and Terrell had mentioned that Natalie usually worked overtime with Marcus on Saturdays. Given the time, they should still be at work if it really was a Saturday. When I tried calling Natalie, she didn't pick up, which only fueled my frustration. I called my workplace and asked the security team if the guys were still there, and they confirmed that they were. I hung up, now deeply suspicious that Natalie was with Marcus. I jumped into my car and decided to drive to my workplace, figuring I might still catch them before they left. During the drive, I could only mutter "stupid B" in my frustration over what was happening. I was consumed by anger and confusion, especially since we had discussed this issue before, and I thought Natalie understood. This time, I wasn't going to let it slide, particularly since she had lied to me. If Marcus was avoiding Natalie, I didn't care anymore. I arrived at the parking lot and began searching for her car, my anger mounting. Entering the building, I headed straight for the shipping dock where Marcus was working. As I walked through the double doors, Marcus's crew looked startled to see me. They were in their jackets, which suggested they were about to leave, but they seemed to pause upon seeing me. I scanned the area but couldn't see Marcus or Natalie, so I assumed they must be in the trucker's lounge. As I made my way there, one of the crew tried to block me, telling me I didn't belong in the building. I warned him to move aside, making it clear I wasn't joking and would confront him if necessary. He tried to act tough but clearly didn't want to engage, so I pushed past him and continued to the trucker's lounge. The trucker's lounge used to be a small waiting area for truckers while their trucks were loaded. A new rule a few years back required truck drivers to stay in their trucks until they received their paperwork, supposedly to prevent theft, though I never understood why anyone would steal the cargo. The room was small and contained only 2 vending machines that were no longer operational. I was sure I'd find them there, and Marcus's groans confirmed my suspicions. Staying close to the wall, I peered inside and was horrified by what I saw. Marcus was with my wife, and it was shocking. Marcus was sitting on a couch with his shirt unbuttoned and his pants and underwear down, with Natalie's face in his lap. The scene resembled something from a dark, twisted story where he appeared as a lord forcing a village woman into a degrading act. Natalie was on her knees, performing an act of submission, while Marcus watched her with a smug expression. I quickly pulled out my phone and began recording, managing to capture at least 7 seconds of their actions. Natalie was too engrossed to notice, and Marcus was simply observing her. After getting some evidence, I confronted them loudly, shouting, "Damn you, witch!" Marcus looked shocked, while Natalie glared at me with annoyance. She looked up and demanded to know what I was doing there, still holding him. I yelled back, "Damn you, witch! Is this how you treat me?" Natalie asked me to leave, clearly irritated. Despite her being caught in the act, she seemed more embarrassed by my reaction than by what was happening. I unleashed a torrent of insults, but she just rolled her eyes and told me to leave them alone. It felt like she was indifferent to the end of our marriage, which only fueled my anger. After hurling countless insults at her, all she could manage were dismissive phrases like, "Please leave," and "I don't care." I demanded to know how she could do this to me after professing her love. She coldly replied, "I don't love you like that, okay?" Her words nearly shattered me, and she reiterated her demand for me to leave. I told her I wanted a divorce, and she responded with a simple, "Okay," in a frustrated tone. I left the warehouse, got into my car, and drove home. Once I was back home, I was overwhelmed with rage. I punched the walls and screamed at the top of my lungs. I couldn't believe she would betray me like this. She had become someone I no longer recognized. I was utterly fed up with the nonsense Natalie had put me through. She still hadn't returned, and I had no idea where she might be. I suspected she might be at her sister's, trying to explain the situation. Regardless of what happens next, I have undeniable proof of her infidelity. I plan to use this evidence in various ways, especially during the divorce proceedings. It clearly illustrates her irresponsibility and disregard for our marriage. Looking back, I realize I shouldn't have depended on Andre to alert me. The signs were already there. Natalie only valued the things I did for her, which was likely the only reason she married me. She didn't seek love, she simply wanted to feel desired. Since Marcus was attractive and wanted her, they got involved. Relationships like theirs typically end in failure because people like her often revert to their true selves. I recently bought a voice-activated recorder, VR, which I've used only once. It seemed I only needed someone who no longer worked with us to make it work. Update. Some people here seem to think I was hesitant to confront Natalie, but that's not true. After discovering her infidelity, I took immediate steps to consult a lawyer and start the divorce process. Natalie had this sense of entitlement in our marriage. I spared no expense to keep her happy, under the impression that this was what a good husband should do. She acted as if I should be grateful because she was a trophy wife, given the attention she received. I bought into it, especially since she was a devoted mother and initially a good wife. But she didn't love me. She only craved attention and the comfortable life I provided. Natalie's constant need for attention was evident from her obsession with Snapchat and Instagram. Most of her followers were men, and the comments on her posts were often inappropriate. I had to develop a thick skin while she posted bikini photos from our vacations to places like Vegas and Jamaica. It was clear she wouldn't change. Despite finding someone who would take care of her, her attraction to Marcus was more compelling. He treated her how she believed she should be treated. With everything coming to a head, I had to face the reality of the situation. I decided it was time to call my siblings and share everything with them. I didn't want to, but it was necessary. I called my older brother Tony and vented about the ordeal using strong language. After asking if I was home, Tony mentioned he needed to run an errand but would come by later. I then called my younger sister Laura and told her what happened. She gave me a lecture but suspected Tony would reach out to her. She said she'd check on me later and hung up. Later, she called back to tell me Tony was on his way to pick me up. She inquired about the kids, and I explained they were at the movies, with Natalie responsible for picking them up. She wasn't thrilled about babysitting, but given my state, it was the only option. After hanging up, I started to drift off until I heard Tony's car pull up. I opened the door and saw my imposing brother approaching with a bag and his toolbox. Tony, with his football background and now a shaved head and beard, looked like a military vet. He came over and gave me a heartfelt hug. Despite our usual tough guy demeanor, we both knew I needed this. After the hug, Tony mentioned he had bought new locks for the house. He wanted to secure the place so Natalie couldn't come back and take anything. After an hour of talking and changing the locks, we headed to Tony's house. Tony and his girlfriend were incredibly supportive, doing their best to lift my spirits throughout the weekend. My sister Laura also came by to talk. After reaching out to my family, I couldn't stop replaying the traumatic events in my mind. I had hoped for a chance to confront Natalie, but the opportunity came sooner than expected. When she admitted she didn't love me in the way I had thought, a burning desire for revenge took hold. I wanted retribution for the deceit I had endured. That Sunday, Natalie's sister Alyssa called me. Initially, Tony didn't want me to answer, but I reminded him that my kids were at Natalie's place. I stepped out of the room to take the call. Alyssa asked what was going on and mentioned that Natalie wouldn't return home but didn't explain why. I told her the truth. I had caught Natalie cheating at my workplace. There was a brief silence before Alyssa started denying it and accusing me of lying. After she had her say, I told her to hang up, saying I would show her the evidence. She started to say something, but I cut her off angrily and hung up. After that, I sent her the video and didn't hear from her for the rest of the day. I spent the remainder of the day trying to relax. When Monday came, I went to work and spoke with my supervisor about Marcus and Natalie. To my surprise, he gave me a testimony sheet to file my complaint. As I was filling out the paperwork, he expressed his sympathy and asked if I was sure this was happening. I confirmed angrily and asked if he wanted to see the video I had taken. He was shocked and asked if I really had evidence. I assured him that I did. He took back the form and said it was no longer necessary. He then called someone to discuss the situation. After hanging up, he told me he had contacted the manager and asked them to send the video to his email, as he would address it when the boss visited the facility in a couple of days. I agreed, but also told him I wouldn't be coming to work during that time, which he was about to suggest as well. A few days later, Natalie's sister Alyssa called me back, which took me by surprise. She said she had talked to Natalie and wanted me to have a conversation with her that night because the kids wanted to come home. I agreed to pick up the kids, but expressed my reluctance to talk to Natalie, feeling there was nothing left to discuss. Alyssa insisted that Natalie had made a mistake, but believed I should be the reasonable one and consider the family. I felt like I was being portrayed as the unreasonable one. I told Alyssa I wasn't willing to talk to Natalie because she had cheated with my coworker and embarrassed me at work. I pointed out that she had brought another man into our home and expected me to act as if nothing had happened. Alyssa claimed that wasn't true, saying Natalie was only involved with Marcus at work or at his place. I laughed and asked how I could be sure of that. For all I knew, she might have been involved with Marcus's friends as well. Alyssa got upset and insisted that wasn't the case. When I pressed her for details, she revealed everything Natalie had told her. I regretted bringing it up, especially knowing Natalie wouldn't lie to Alyssa, which made the situation even worse. According to Alyssa, when Natalie first met Jasmine, Marcus was already talking to Jasmine, and Natalie had informed them she was there to pick me up. While waiting for me, Natalie and Jasmine started talking and hanging out whenever Natalie came around. Alyssa said they became friends over time and enjoyed spending time together during lunch. Marcus began complimenting Natalie on her appearance, which surprised her but made her feel good. One day, Natalie admitted to Jasmine that she found Marcus attractive, and Jasmine informed him of this. Afterward, Marcus started getting too close and making inappropriate comments. Natalie played it off, but she secretly liked him and thought about him often. I expressed my disbelief and asked why she didn't tell me sooner. She admitted she didn't want to because she really liked Marcus and found his unpredictable behavior appealing. I asked when all of this started, and Alyssa hesitated before revealing the details. She mentioned that Natalie had told her about a birthday party hosted by Jasmine's sister, who was known for getting drunk at parties. Natalie had attended the party where Marcus was also present. Natalie was surprised to see him there, and they ended up spending time together and having a good time. Alyssa asked if Marcus was pursuing Natalie, and she confirmed he was. They started dancing together, and things took a more aggressive turn. When I asked what she meant by aggressive, Alyssa said Marcus asked Natalie to twerk for him. Natalie complied, and with her tight leggings, it was evident Marcus was enjoying it. They began kissing and making out, and things escalated from there. Alyssa continued, saying that when Natalie went to hang out at Marcus's apartment with Jasmine, he made advances on her, which she allowed. Jasmine left them alone in the apartment. Alyssa added that after making out, Marcus performed oral sex on Natalie. Over time, he repeatedly attempted to engage in sexual acts. Sometimes she allowed it, and sometimes she stopped him. Eventually, she no longer resisted, and he convinced her to reciprocate. I asked Alyssa if these encounters had taken place when my kids were around. She clarified that everything happened at work and at Marcus's apartment. I was stunned and told her I couldn't believe Natalie had done this to me. Alyssa echoed my disbelief and mentioned that Natalie was captivated by Marcus's supposed skills and his wild side. She explained that Natalie initially thought oral sex would be the extent of their encounters, but Marcus pushed for more. Alyssa recounted an incident when Marcus had aggressively turned Natalie around and pinned her against the couch. In hindsight, Natalie realized that was when he fully took advantage of her. Alyssa told her she should have walked away, but Natalie was unable to, allowing him to take her from behind. I shook my head in disbelief and asked again how she could have done this to me. Alyssa said Natalie found the whole thing thrilling, and the wrongness of it only added to the excitement. Natalie was drawn to Marcus's rebellious nature, and when he finally won her over, he lived up to her expectations. Alyssa noted that Marcus was so eager that she worried the neighbors might hear them. I could relate because when I was younger, my brother and I helped my aunt move out of one of her apartments. During the move, we heard loud noises and later realized someone below was watching an action movie. The walls were so thin. If Marcus's apartment was similarly constructed, the neighbors likely heard everything. Alyssa said that after the first encounter, whenever Marcus wanted something, he got it. It was meant to be their secret, until Andre exposed them, showing he had more courage than they had anticipated. Alyssa began to share more details, but I cut her off, saying that the information about the party and the apartment was already overwhelming. She asked if I could at least be calm and have a conversation with Natalie, but I firmly refused. I told her I would be picking up the kids the next day and had no intention of talking to Natalie. Alyssa suggested that stubbornness from both sides wouldn't help, but I insisted that Natalie had humiliated me, and I wasn't interested in giving her another chance. I confirmed my plans to collect the kids, and Alyssa expressed frustration before hanging up. The day was rough, and I had to pull myself out of a low. A few hours later, I got a call from an unfamiliar number, followed by a text. It turned out to be a coworker, which surprised me. I was driving, so I answered through my Bluetooth. He asked what was going on, and I said I was running errands. Then he asked if I had anything to do with Marcus's firing, which caught me off guard. He explained that 2 men and a woman in suits had come to our workplace with our supervisor and headed straight to the truckers' lounge. I suspected they were investigating to match the room in the video. Later, he told me that about 20 minutes after their arrival, they called Marcus into the office and asked him to pack up his things. I admitted to my coworker that I was responsible, and he said he would have done the same. He also asked when I would return to work, and I told him I planned to come in on Friday for a half day. He responded positively and said he'd catch up with me then. I felt a sense of relief and prepared dinner for myself that night. The following day, I had to pick up the kids, and I wasn't looking forward to it. It had been several days since I'd seen Natalie, and my brother Tony came along for support. When I arrived, the kids were thrilled to see me. They told me their mother had been harsh in ignoring them, so they wanted to come home. I noticed Natalie in the kitchen, engrossed in a phone call with her sister. I told the kids to get in the car, and my oldest daughter asked if she could bring her iPad. Natalie abruptly objected, saying it had to stay because she bought it. My daughter got upset, so I told her to wait in the car. As Natalie ignored me, I was stunned by her pettiness. This led to a heated argument where I called her derogatory names. She retaliated by calling me a snitch for getting Marcus fired and told me to cry to my mother. Natalie also said I was lucky she even acknowledged me and suggested that Marcus and I should have settled things with a fight instead of getting him fired. I retorted that I only fight for real women, not those who don't deserve it. Natalie insulted me further, calling me dusty and lame, and said she doesn't love a lame guy. Frustrated, I grabbed a glass of orange juice and threw it at her, narrowly missing. Natalie retaliated by hurling a fork at my head, which fortunately missed as well. The chaos was eventually stopped by Tony, Alyssa, and Alyssa's friend. Natalie continued shouting that she didn't want me and yelled, "Next! Next!" My brother practically dragged me to the porch to calm down. Once I had calmed down, I left, exhausted and unable to fight my brother to get back inside. When I returned to the car, I told my daughter that her mother had taken the iPad. She said she didn't care anymore and just wanted to leave. I couldn't believe the ordeal I had just endured. Although I knew I had crossed a line, it felt good to express my frustrations. Now my kids are with me, and with the new locks on the door, they'll stay with me. I had to gently explain to the kids that their mother and I wouldn't be living together anymore, which was heartbreaking for them, but they understood. My focus is now on the divorce proceedings. The lawyers advised that the video could be useful in several arguments. I'm convinced Natalie is overly confident, and I hope her actions were worth it. If she thinks she can have a meaningful relationship with Marcus, she's fooling herself. Marcus or anyone else is unlikely to commit to her. At nearly 40 with multiple kids, he's not looking to be a stepdad overnight. If that's her expectation, I know Marcus better than she does. Natalie was just another conquest for him, and once he's done, he'll move on. I'm sure reality will hit her soon, probably within the year. At least I can have some peace of mind now, though I still worry about my kids, my family, and maybe even Alyssa if she ever sees how foolish Natalie's actions were.